Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Bringing Compliance to Your Statistical Computing Environment. Before we jump into the presentation, I'd like to go over a few things with you all. So for our next slide, just on the webinar logistics, this will be a 45-minute webinar with a Q&A at the end. As a reminder, all attendees are muted, but please feel free to use the questions or chat tabs to submit questions to our panelists to be answered for the Q&A session at the end. And then going on to the next slide, we see a lot of our current clients have signed up for this webinar, so thank you for joining. For some people that are new to Certara, I would like to just take a quick 30 seconds just to introduce who we are. So here at Certara, our mission is accelerating medicines to patients with our end-to-end platform of software and technology-enabled services, powered by great people. At Certara, we optimize R&D productivity, commercial value, and patient outcomes through our unique portfolio of model-informed drug development, market access, and regulatory science solutions. Our clients include over 1,650 global biopharmaceutical companies, leading academic institutions, and key regulatory agencies across 61 countries. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for today's webinar. So we have two speakers today. Anna Henry, Executive Director of Training at Certara University. Anna leads the Certara University team in providing modeling and simulation for new drug development through education, skills, and expertise in the global healthcare industry. Anna has more than 20 years experience in a variety of roles in the industry. She also has extensive experience in pharmaceutical training, software demonstration, software support, and product management. Kevin Trim, Senior Director of Product Strategy and Services. Kevin brings over 17 years of experience in pharmaceutical research and software development. He spearheads product strategy for Certara's data science platforms and leads implementation of technology solutions, collaborating closely with clients. Now that you've met our speakers for today, I'd like to invite Kevin to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Danny. So we'll just do a quick introduction before we get to the demonstration of Certara's Integral data repository. So Certara Integral is a cloud-based, SaaS-hosted, and 21 CFR Part 11 compliant data and model repository. It's got a very intuitive user interface for collecting, managing, storing all sorts of data sets for analysis, sharing, and reporting. And it's really something that's quite agnostic to the analytical tool being used, whether that's SAS, R, Python, or really any other kind of tool. It's a scalable and validated analytical repository. It significantly improves the biostatistics workflow, and it ensures all that the work that you're doing is traceable, reproducible, and secure. We'll go a little bit over the technical infrastructure. As I already mentioned, it is a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant SaaS solution that's built in AWS. It can be deployed as a multi-tenant environment, a private tenant, or in fact be co-hosted, where Certara hosts the application and the data is hosted within the customer's AWS environment. Certara Integral is a bolt-on compliance solution to an existing statistical computing environment. I want to make that clear that Integral is not providing the computing. It assumes that you have a computing environment, whether that's just on your PC, on an on-premise server, or in the cloud. It really doesn't matter. Certara Integral will provide compliance to that environment. It's got a direct URL access to the repository, facilitated by local client application, which you'll see in the demo here today. We use Okta for our authentication that enables single sign-on and also federation with your own authentication provider that you're using locally. There's role-based access with the user types of admin, user, partner, quality assurance, or archivist. And there are configurable permission groups that the customer will set up themselves. It includes things like also things like blinding for randomized controlled trials, and whichever kind of permissions you wish to grant to the various users within the system. It's got a very configurable and automated folder structure to harmonize the storage and workflow that you have within your organization. So, Integral is not going to force you to have a new sort of structure. You can imitate and standardize the structure that you'd like to use internally. The metadata for Integral are also configurable, and we use metadata to control permissions to content as well as for searching. And the archiving happens directly in the working environment. So it's not a separate place where you need to archive your data. It is a GXP compliant archive directly in the working environment where you can still see the content once it's archived, but you can no longer change it. So a few notes about programming workflows for consistency and efficiency. So we have save points within Integral, and we'll show that today. Most people are familiar with the concept of saving versions of files, but some of you may also be familiar with the concept of saving versions of analyses, so something that you might do in a source code control repository. Integral does both of these things, and therefore you can always go back to previous versions of files, but also previous versions of actual analyses. We've got tools in there to help with QC and review that we'll be able to show you in the demo today. And it facilitates the management of reusable code and having a single source of truth that you can rely on for any macros or programs that you use routinely. Because it's Part 11 compliant, of course, it does have audit trails for files that you can have on demand, and these things can include the differences between files, whether those be data files or program files. It has electronic signatures, and very importantly, it has the concept of dependencies, where the system knows that your analysis is dependent on a certain data source, for example, and if that data source changes, your analyses will show and render as out of date. So again, a few more notes on the system interaction and support. This Integral is compatible with both cloud-based and on-premise computing environments. The client application that you'll install within your computing environment, that could be either a Windows environment or the various flavors of Linux. As I mentioned, it is agnostic to the analytical tool being used. It doesn't care if you're using SAS or R or really any other tool. There are many benefits to having a vendor-hosted solution. So Certara Integral is validated by Certara with each rollout. That really limits and reduces the validation burden on the customer themselves. We do regularly update the system, so it's about every 6 to 8 months there's a new release, and this is based on user feedback that we have. We really treat our user group very much like a consortium, so that when people are telling us things that they'd like to see in the system, they go to the top of the line in terms of the next release and roadmap. It's something that's very rapidly deployed. Integral can be up and running in just a matter of weeks. It's not a 6 to 9 to 12 months deployment like some of the systems out there today. And all the maintenance and support is included within the licensing fees. And we have professional training and a support desk that is on call 24/5. There are system APIs that our services group can help you implement custom integrations. That being said, most people are able to use Integral without any such integrations. It is very much plug and play, but depending on any integrations that you may want, we can certainly help you out with that. And it eliminates the need for secure transfer sites and email data exchanges. It really is a collaborative environment that doesn't require VPN from your external partners, where you can really exchange work and data in a very seamless manner, simply through a connection to the internet. So a very simplistic architectural diagram or cartoon here. If we notice in the bottom right of this diagram, that is the user's workstation, and they would connect as they usually would to their computation environment where SAS or R or any other tool may be located. We'll ask you to install our client application there as well, and that really mediates the transfer of information between our AWS cloud and whatever your computing environment is. So moving data and synchronizing data back and forth. And of course, you can just directly connect to our repository through any web-based browser that you might use. For example, we see in the diagram here, that's Chrome. So that's basically a simplistic way to explain how Integral works. And with no further ado, I think we'll get right into the demo. All right, so I'm going to access Integral through my web browser. Provide my username and password. All right, so now I'm inside the application and I can see all the studies and projects that I have access to as an administrator. That's 111 projects. So I can see files and contents of files and you know, whatever the things are within my access. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to alter the security in order to create an access group for statistician who will be Anna. So I'll go here to my security module. And I can see here is Anna. Currently, she's a full license user and she's in a group membership as follows. So I'm going to create a new group over here called statistician. Add. And now that I have this group, I'm going to add some rules to it. So the first rule I have is called integral, which is the name of the compound. And it's going to apply to the folder types project. It's going to be looking at the property called compound, the operator equal, and the criteria equals integral. So all studies or projects that have this compound included as the metadata, Anna, once in the security group, will have access to do all of these things to the various folder types and permissions. So I'm going to add this rule, and I'm going to add one more rule to make sure that she has access to a global library of SAS macros and programs. So I'm going to call this one data manager, and also applies to project. Property is data management. Operator equal, criteria is true. I'm going to add that rule as well with full permission to that content. All right, so now I'm going to go back to Anna's profile here and remove her from the groups that she's in and add her to the statistician security group here. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to return to the home page. And I'm going to add in a new project. So the folder type is project here. I have to give it a name. We can call this integral as well, with the compound of integral. And I can add the data management one there as well, and click apply. And now I have a new study here, which I can find by the type ahead and see here it is. So what I'll do now is upload a data file for Anna to work on. And biostats webinar. And this is my original file for her to work on. Okay, so now I can see I have that file here. It's an XPT file, and I can view the contents. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anna so that she can perform a statistical analysis.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So I am playing the role of a statistician, doing SAS analysis and generating tables, figures, and listings. And I'm accessing Integral using this Integral application. You can see that it looks very similar to what Kevin was showing you, but it doesn't have a URL. So this is an application that is co-locally installed, in my case, where SAS is also installed, which is my local PC. So I can show you how I'm going to be doing some work with SAS and then using Integral to hold all the work that I have done. You will notice that I have access to only a smaller set of studies, and those come from the permissions that I have been given. Okay, so why do I have more than just this integral study? Well, some of these studies right here also had a compound that you can see. The compound right here was integral. Okay. So either integral or that data management set to true, so I have access to those. If I'm working on this integral, I can also make it a favorite, for example, and I can easily find that by going here. Okay, some of these are my favorite ones. So I would like to start by creating within this experiments folder, I want to create a new folder that is going to contain my SAS analysis. So I can go here to the ellipsis and just set new folder. I'm going to be calling this SAS analysis. So the intention here is that it's going to hold all the analysis that I'm going to be doing. Okay? The experiment type has an asterisk, meaning that is a require metadata that I need to enter. So I'm setting that to SAS. And I will not put anything else for now. I'll just apply. And now I have this subfolder called SAS analysis. Because I'm putting it within experiments folder, this is a save point folder. That means that every version of this folder, we save different versions of these folders. So I'm going to have a version 1 of SAS analysis, and then if I do any type of updates, then I'm going to get a version 2. All right. I would like to start also by using some files that are within my global library. So let me show you the global library. In here, I have a library of our scripts, a library of SAS Macros, and a library of SAS programs. So if I want my local library within Integral to hold some of these macros and some of these programs, I can use this copy link function that we have within Integral. So this is right here on the top. And I can filter also by favorites if I want to. I can locate the programs and decide within the global library, I might want to use this formatted macro. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do is to take this macro, the formatted mac, and I want to put it in the library folder within Integral right there. So I'll just grab it and drop it into the library folder. Okay. Now, there's several ways to do this. You can make a copy and you can have a notification. So if anything happens to that macro, to the formatted macro, I would be notified. So I'm going to do that. But you could also do an actual active link. So if there's if you make it as a link to that macro and if there's a change, it will then indicate that it has changed and it will update automatically. Okay, but I'm just going to go ahead and use a copy, select OK. I have to enter a reason. So I'm going to say this is SAS macro. I have to sign because I'm making a change to the database. And maybe I also want a SAS program template. So I have one right here that maybe I can utilize with some changes to do the work that I'm going to do. So I would like to put that one into my into the experiments SAS analysis folder that I have created. As before, I can just grab it and drop it right into that folder. Okay? I'm going to make a copy this time without notifications. I expect to change these. I'm just going to say a reason to enter this is a copy of SAS template. I'm signing in. I now have used whatever I need with an integral to start my analysis. And also you will notice that in this app, in this integral app, I have a synchronization of here icon that you didn't see in the previous one from the URL. So now what I can do is I can find the study that I'm working on, which is integral, and I can sync it to my local drive or wherever else I want to. And this is set up here with this configuration wheel. If I click on it, I select my destination folder. So in this case, it's going to call SAS demo, but you can change these to anywhere that you can access. Okay. When I highlight this project, I can now sync it by using that arrow, select sync, and then it's syncing this whole study into my local drive. So everything that I have put there, you can see that it's now there. From now, I'm going to be working in my local environment, which for you, it could be wherever SAS lives. And we are really disconnected from integral until I come back to do a synchronization. So I'm going to go to my local, to this local SAS demo. You can see that I now have a folder of integral that contains all those subfolders that we saw. Okay. So I'm going to do some work in SAS. I'm going to go to the SAS analysis, and maybe I'm going to start by, instead of calling this template, I'm going to change these to integral. That's what I intend to analyze. I'm going to open it in SAS, and I'm going to do some changes. So I'm going to here, for example, some, these are just commented out, but I'm going to make some comments that I'm the one that is modifying these, and that today is, I'm just going to say April 2021, and I can add details if I want. I want to adapt it for integral analysis. Okay. In this SAS program that I have, it's expecting an XPT data set. And because I know the folder structure that integral has brought for me, I can say, well, wherever my path, my program is located, I'm going to go up 2 levels. I'm going to find this data folder called data. And I know that there I have this XPT study that is called Fortanova that Kevin had created for me. Okay. And then I can do whatever changes I need to do in my SAS. So I'm going to do maybe, I'm going to do a replacement here whenever I find this drug. Say, yeah, we're going to do dose. It's going to be 10, maybe 10 milligrams. I'm going to replace all. And if I have this parenthesis of drug, I want to call it integral. So I'm just making changes to my SAS program. Okay. I want to point out that the SAS program is going to be generating some directories for me where some of the work, so some of these tables, figures, and listings are going to be created. Okay. When I'm done here, I can save these now. I can save this program, and I can run it. Okay, you already see that some of these files are being generated, or some of the subfolders are already being generated from SAS. I'll go back here, still running. And it's going to be creating a Word document for me too. This has just showed up here. So you see this is a table that I'm doing here. In this particular study, I'm doing an analysis using the mixed procedure to statistically evaluate the differences in PK parameters between regions. One is called test and the other one is called reference in this example. Okay, so I have now all this output, and if I'm happy with it, I can just, I can close SAS2, and I can save, I can also save everything, my program and everything that I have. So now I'm ready to sync all this back to Integral. So I go back to the Integral app. I can refresh my local directory just to show you here that under SAS Analysis, I now have 3 other subfolders, and I have an updated SAS program. And they're showing, I'm not sure it's very clear to see here, but you can see that they are kind of foggy, these folders. That indicates they have not been linked yet into Integral. So I can take this folder in particular. So I can go to my SAS Analysis and then sync this back into Integral. Okay. I have to enter some of this required information, like this experiment type. In this case, it's SAS, and I can put more information and can add a description if I wanted to do that. I'm not going to for this demo, just going to put next. In here, we have what's called a dependencies. So what this is going to do is, if I indicate, for example, that this file for ANOVA is a dependency for my analysis, it means that everything is based on this data set. And if there's any changes that are done to this data set, it would be noticed by Integral and it will flag it as such. Okay, so I'm going to set my dependency of the SAS analysis based on this XBT file. I can go to next, and if there's something that I want to exclude, I can exclude it there. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep going. I have to enter a reason, so I'm going to call this my prelim for preliminary SAS analysis. Okay. And then click on finish, entering a password to record this change. Okay, so now it's syncing all the SAS work that I have done in my local drive back to Integral. This should be done quickly. There's quite a lot of figures that were created. I'm going to click OK. All right, let's take a look at this. So going back to home here, and I can go to favorites if I want to. You can see that within my SAS analysis, now I have these folders of figures, for example, where I can click in a figure and go to the contents, and I can see all the figures that have been created by SAS. You can see that there's quite a lot of them. Okay, and I can click on all of them to see them. Okay. I also have my log, where I have the SAS log that I can view with an Integral if I want to also. And in my output, I've created some .list files that can also be viewed since they are text files. And I have the SAS program. So one thing that I wanted to show you is that I might like to see what are the changes between that template that I use from the global library, that SAS template, to the one that I use for the analysis. So if you want to do this type of comparisons, there is a compare option right here on the top that you can go to. And I can select what I would like to compare. So for example, I want to take this SAS program template. So this template that I started with, I want to compare to the SAS program that I actually used, which is under SAS analysis. So I can drag this here. And now I have side by side, I have both the template and the SAS program. And these lines here indicate the changes. So I can click on it and see, okay, in this section that was commented out, I added some information. You can see here that I added the name of the program, the XBT file. I'm changing anything that relates to drug to Integral and so on. Okay, so this is an easy way to compare the two versions of the SAS program. All right, so right now I'm going to pass this back to Kevin for him to do an update to the data set. Kevin, passing this back to you.
All right, thank you, Anna. Okay, so now what's going to happen in our workflow here is that the data set is going to get updated, as can of course happen in the conduct of a clinical trial. So I will upload a new revision of this data set. So I have this corrected version here. I'll upload. It will warn me to tell me that the new file has a different name than the original file, but I'm going to okay that. I'm just going to say updated data is my reason. And now I do have an updated data set. And if I refresh this, I can see that now this project that we have is turned red. If I click on it, it'll show me that beneath it, it's the experiments folder that's red, and under that, the SAS analysis. And so the problem here is that this analysis is now out of date. So if I come to the history tab and I look into my save points that we discussed earlier, I can see that this analysis is out of date. And if I want to go in deeper, I can see that it is in fact because the dependency, which was this file in the integral data for ANOVA XPT file, the analysis is based on version 1, which is now out of date. And of course, if I come to my data file, I can see here that I am in fact on version 2, which is why we have this broken dependency here. I'll take this opportunity to show you the audit trail the integral can produce, including differences in files. So that just downloads as a zip, and as in the PDF, I can see the various properties of the files, the dates and the times and the history of the reasons and so forth of the different versions. But I can also see in this Excel file, opening on my other screen, that these are in fact the differences between the two files. So on lines 2 and 4, there were values of 12.3 and 991 that have been replaced with 15 and 1055 respectively under this eval column. So that's a little bit about the audit trail and integral. Okay, so now that the file is updated, Anna would have to go in and update her analysis in order to account for those differences on those lines. So perhaps now I will actually pass this back to you, Anna, so that you can update your analysis accordingly.
Yes, great. So Kevin and I in different locations. I'm in Colorado and Kevin is in near Montreal in Canada. But this automatically shows us a lot of the what has happened. So I can see that this integral, as he showed you, has been updated, and I need to refresh these. Okay. You will also notice that I've got a notification. So if I click on this notification, it now explains to me that this has been updated, it has changed. And this is because I put that dependency, my analysis depending on that data set. Okay. Okay, so I'm going back to the synchronization view. I can find the integral study and I can just sync it back to my local. Okay, so I'm syncing everything back and I'm gonna go ahead. It's gonna tell me it already exists. I'm gonna say okay and sync it. So what I need to do now is to rerun this work, right? So let me just show you here. This is the integral. It has the new data set. And within the experiments, I have my SAS analysis that I want to rerun. So I'm going to go ahead and run, open the SAS program. And I'm going to make one more change just to show you one more thing afterwards. So I'm going to include here a proc print. It's a proc print that is going to show the subject that had the change in the data. We're going to save these and run it. So it's going to go through, in this case, it's going through the same exact steps as before, but it's using an updated data set. Okay. So is creating those tables, figures, and listings is also going to create that Word document. Okay. So we see it here. This created that table again in Word, and it's using the updated data set. And all my tables, figures, and listings has also been updated. Okay. So here you can see that the new values for the subjects that are being used are the values that we showed in that audit trail. Okay. So that's just a confirmation. All right, so I've done this update to the analysis, and I would like to now sync back. So I refresh this, go back to my SAS analysis folder, and sync this back to Integral, entering the requirements and also highlighting again this dependency for the ANOVA dataset. Entering a reason, maybe we'll call this the final analysis. And logging it in. So it's syncing everything that I've done locally back to Integral. And as before, we can go to this file and just take a look at everything that was done. And one thing that you will notice, if I go to this SAS analysis, for example, this program, now I'm on revision 2 because I have done this second sync. And just to finalize here, I'd like to also show you that the compare that I showed you before between two different files can also be done with the same file, but using the two revisions. So if I find that SAS program in my SAS analysis folder, it's now comparing version 2 to version 1. Okay, so if I click on here, I would say that I added some rows here, and it shows me that difference. And if you have many versions, you could just use the drop down right here, and it will show you all the versions. So you can compare versions of the same file using this compare. Okay, so this is it for me. Passing this back to Kevin.
All right, thank you. And I think that should actually conclude the demo portion of the presentation, and we can move into the questions now.
Great, thank you, Anna and Kevin. I think we have one question that's come in so far, and I'll just read the question. Are all types of design stat analysis code available, like two-way crossover, partial and full replicate, NTI, I believe that's near therapeutic index, etc., within Integral?
Yes, there really is no limitation in anything that SAS can do when you're using it with Integral. So whatever you do in SAS normally, you're really using SAS natively when you're coupling it with Integral. So anything that you would normally do, you can continue to do in Integral. And Integral really just becomes the place where you are storing your programs, your analysis results, and your source data. So it's really the repository, and it doesn't affect the normal functioning of SAS or any other program.
Okay, next question we have, besides statistical data, what other types of data can be used with Integral?
Yeah, it's really not dependent on any kind of data. In fact, we have customers that use it as a document repository as well. So, in the same way that you might use SharePoint or something, you can use it for all your clinical operations documents as you're collecting them throughout the conduct of the trial. So really any kind of file, whether that's a data file or a document, can be stored in Integral and managed in the same way that you saw the analysis done here today.
Okay, thank you. Does our organization have to take care of system validation, or is that done by Certara?
So we are hosting Integral, and we do release it to the customer in a validated state. So on the customer side, they'll typically do something in the realm of validation, like some connectivity tests, some sort of unit representative workflow integration test. But validating it from end to end is not something that the customer really needs to do, because it's something that we've done. So typically what happens when customers are looking to buy Integral is that they'll audit us as a vendor, and they'll look at for typically like how we're dealing with security. That's one sort of audit, and another audit would be around our validation. And so we have all the SOPs and documents to show what our validation procedure is. We have a very conservative validation approach, and you can see all of those things. And in fact, we do post the validation summary report for each version on the help site. So in the same place you find the user manual, you can see the validation summary report for the current version.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I see another question has come in. I am a fresh learner of Phoenix. Integral application looks different than Phoenix. Is it included in the Phoenix application?
Yeah, so for the PK/PD user of Phoenix, we do have a plugin that goes directly from Phoenix to Integral. For the statistical use that we saw here today in the demo, that was using a client app that you install locally wherever you're using SAS or R. With the Phoenix user, you actually just have a menu item that says Integral, and you connect to it in a similar way, but you launch it directly from Phoenix. So there is a hand in glove integration between Phoenix and Integral.
Okay, next question relates to the client app. If users can use local SAS installations, they are practically downloading a copy of the data for analysis. How is this local storage of data taking care of compliance?
So the compliant copy of the data is in the repository, and when you're working locally, that's when you're producing results. And the question really is, how do you store the results in the data after the fact? So this isn't really different than taking any kind of observation in a study. If you received the data originally in the repository, and then, for example, you bring it locally and you manipulate it in some way, first of all, Integral is going to track the difference between the first file and the new file, and the person who's doing the submission to the repository after the fact is going to be providing an electronic signature and a date time stamp and a reason for why they're doing the submission. So the important thing is that it's completely traceable. So the analysis that you've done and any manipulation to the data that you've done is traceable back to the original and all the various versions. So just because you bring it locally doesn't bring it out of compliance as long as you eventually store it back. I mean, if you bring it locally and you never put it back, well, then the official version is the one that's in the repository. But as you're iterating, you need access to those data, and you can do that locally, and it shouldn't break compliance in any manner.
Okay, it looks like that is the last question.